and welcome to Art Portals. On
Hey,
today's episode, we are going to be discussing embracing failure.
yep,
We've got Rex in nighttime mode.
you already know. Midnight mode.
For the viewers on Spotify who can't see it, he's all tortilla'd and shaded out,
Just so you know,
if that
if you're
means it.
watching this, I'm giving you an ocular assessment and you passed.
Yes, we're
You
going to
look
play good
good.
cop, bad cop today.
You look great today. What you been up to?
So, little life update. We had our first celebrity encounter the other day.
Yup.
We were out. It was our 6-year anniversary, and we went out, explored the town, went to LA, went to a show opening, and we happened to bump into Reggie Watts. That was pretty exciting.
He's the best.
Yeah, Rex basically like pushed my shoulder and was like, "Bro, look who it is." And we were like, "Oh shit, it's Reggie." And I just like went up to him and was like, "Yo, hello," and said hi. And that was
Mm-hmm.
pretty much it.
He's a really nice guy.
Yeah, he's super cool.
We saw some beautiful art.
Yeah, we did. It was like a really interesting vibe. It was at Hashimoto Contemporary Gallery, and they had a potluck themed art show. So everybody was bringing in different meals and food.
Yeah, it
And
was
it
amazing.
was super great vibes. Like, I love being able to walk into a gallery and there's food. That's
And
like
a lot
the
of
best thing.
dogs.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's like a very, I feel like LA thing is to just have your dog with you wherever you go, or maybe it's just like a California thing. We're still getting used to that.
It's amazing.
It's pretty cool. Awesome. So let's get right into the episode. Embracing failure. What does that mean? And why, as artists, do we talk about it so often? Rex,
Hey,
do you embrace failure within your art process? And how would you describe it to our wonderful viewers?
I like to think so. I like to think of everything that I do as a series of mistakes and then an attempt to correct those mistakes. And I feel the same way about my art.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that essentially that's all it is. It's like your and the way you said that was so calming because I feel a lot of people put so much pressure on themselves to create these beautiful, perfected, aesthetic things. But we forget that in order to achieve like a sense of aesthetic, you have to really be able to get through that messy stage of figuring yourself out and not knowing things on a technical level. But there's also this level of understanding that if you have such high expectations with what you're creating, then it becomes extremely difficult to gauge your happiness through the process, because at the end of the day, like, if you're expecting yourself to become like this realistic sculptor and your sculptures aren't really looking like that right now, then that just becomes this kind of negative process. So really just about getting out of your own head and managing your expectations.
Yeah, and I think by failing, you're also more determined. And I think there's a certain level of relaxation that you get into, and maybe a little bit too much confidence as you develop a skill set. And
Yeah.
a little bit of humility is good when you're making things.
Yeah, I agree. I think that in order to stay humble, you do have to have a level of self-criticism within that process. But if your level of criticism is like so high, then it's like very difficult to actually be in a space where you have forgiveness for yourself, even when things don't work out.
Yeah,
And through
you
that
gotta
process, yeah,
find that balance between the two.
yeah, exactly. Balance is everything, I think. And so, like, really when you first start out and even just as you get older within your art process, you can change up your mediums, you can, really focus on one thing or have like a set goal, but sometimes there's more excitement to be found when we create something ugly, quote unquote ugly, that isn't really necessarily ugly, it's just different. And there's something to be said about creating different art.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's that funny saying, no one can tell you you're doing it wrong if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
I think a little bit of mystery is good.
Yeah, exactly. And there's also this level of almost naivety going into things. I feel like what I always like to think of are my students when I was an art teacher. Sometimes when it came to, like, the still lives or, drawing realistic, that would be, like, the one kind of, like, stiffness that everybody would do or, like, they wouldn't even start and they would just be so afraid and they'd get so into their head, and a lot of that I feel I don't know if you agree with me, comes from the school system because, like, I feel like the capitalistic schools, like, they prepare you for, like, industry jobs, so everything's like a multiple choice test, there's always an answer to things, but when it comes to art, really, there's so many different types of ways and methods and answers. And so, like, the way
Right,
somebody sees one thing isn't going to be the same as the other. So, I think that because of this pressure that's been indoctrinated into, especially the younger students, they do have a really difficult time embracing failure. And so, when we tell them, like, yeah, like, you can have fun, like, it doesn't matter. We would just want to see you drawing or painting or whatever it is. They're like, wait,
right.
really? They get surprised.
Yeah. And when I was giving assignments to my kids, it was always difficult to grade things. Or for me, it was easy, but I feel like some of the kids had a hard time understanding how I grade the assignments. And a lot of it is just, are you improving? And also, how do you feel? Like there were a lot of assignments that I gave that were just vaguely like, yeah, as long as you do it, but I also want to see you try. And then it's like, what is trying? And then it also depends on the kid. And some kids you definitely pick up on who you can push. And I think that it's definitely not the school system, it's the teachers. And
Mhm. That's true.
it's an extension of the system, but it's up to the individuals to counteract that feeling that you're in control or you're being controlled by a system. Because at any point you can just step out and be like, I'm gonna be a little weird and maybe take the heat for it, but I think that there's a lot to be said for teaching in a more relaxed, like human friendly style.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you actually. It's not this much as much as the system as it is the teachers.
Hmm.
And sometimes when, you're not in a space where you do have the right guidance or the right teachers, that can also be discouraging because you're seeing these like completed versions of what it means to be like the successful artist. And so I guess in a way we could be your teachers for today and try to motivate you guys to recognize that it's okay to mess things up. Like that is beautiful and it's you and it's unique to yourself. And really that is the whole point of creation. It's not just about having things manicured and look like this European, tempera painting. Like none of that matters. It's really just about being able to express yourself in a way that is emotional and even through those ugly stages, that's how you grow, that's how you learn.
Absolutely. Yeah, the ugly stages are probably the most discouraging, but they're so good for character development.
Yeah, exactly. I think that really it's a process of yes, like this product based thing that you're going to create, but it is also a life lesson that you can learn because I feel like, I don't know, sometimes we get so into our heads when things don't go the way we expect them to, or we like say the most embarrassing thing. When you are in that space, you have to like kind of step away from how you envisioned in your head and just like kind of be grateful that you were able to be vulnerable with yourself in that sense. Because it's really just about that vulnerability that will teach you the type of person you are and who you want to be, and that helps you have a better relationship within yourself and through this life. And yeah, I think that really failure is what's going to allow you to know yourself on a deeper level.
Yeah. And also, like, are you having fun? Like, I think that failure is looked at as a negative thing, but it's so fun to fail and like just fuck up. Like, obviously at the moment it's tragic, but then after a little bit you're like, wow, I actually kind of like that. And then it's like you're dancing between the predictable and just the infinite unknown of what could possibly happen. However many potential paintings that could come out of this like blank canvas suddenly like taking all these turns, and it's really exciting. But I feel like if you are in that mindset, like I'm in the driver's seat, like I know what's going on, it's like you can see it in the person's art when you look at it, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think that like there's a level of authenticity that shows when you're willing to just kind of like even leave things unfinished in a weird way because it separates you from your success within the career version of where you're trying to go, and it gives you the opportunity to just kind of be within the process of development because as you
Mhm.
develop your work as an artist, like that is where you learn the most about yourself. I think it's really funny when yes, we see like really big successful people and they have these like really manicured like figures or, they're creating these like functional pieces that people need. But then when you separate yourself from what's already been done in that like status quo, I feel that I'm just more interested to kind of learn who you are. And like when I see those like flaws, those mistakes, maybe like certain things are out of focus or there's this like subject matter that's speaking through from the piece, it's like and it could have been just like a happy accident, like Bob Ross used to say. There's something really exciting about being able to see a person individuality through what they're creating.
Yeah, I've seen David Cho talking about his 70% rule,
Yeah.
just stop working on it at 70%.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. There's been many failures. I think that's like the number one thing. And I am not afraid to share those. So, like, if you're an artist and there's something that you did and you're not so happy with it, show it in a room, show your friends, go to your professors, go to your class, and just be vulnerable. And people might have kind of negative things to say about it, but if you already saw that within you and somebody else is amplifying that opinion, it helps you solidify that feeling. Then you can start to move forward and be like, yeah, that wasn't good. It's okay. And there's something like really magical that begins to happen when you're able to see that.
Yeah, it is nice being in a classroom setting
Yeah.
because it's almost like, hey, yeah, me too. Like I've been through that as well, and comparing notes. And I always told my students that art school is kind of like Hogwarts. Like you're all sharing spells, you're all sharing like shortcuts, because art school is like all of the best kids from the art school or from the high school
Hmm.
all in one place. So it's very humbling when you're not the only kid who's really really good at art. Suddenly everyone is, and it's competitive.
Yeah. It feels almost intimidating when you're in a setting like that and then everybody else has something to bring to the table and then it makes you feel like, whoa, like I want to try and impress these people. I want to try and like showcase what I got, but you have to almost get away from like trying to impress because it
Yeah,
doesn't matter. Like this is about finding community through, you know, experimenting. And if you're in a space where you can be vulnerable, it's going to inspire others to also want to be in that same vulnerability. If everything is always this like finished perfect thing, then how are we growing? How are we learning? That's something
right.
that I always like to question. It's like it, I feel like it's so funny when people bring like finished pieces to critiques, and I mean this must be like my own personal experience because I you can always critique a finished painting or sculpture or whatever it is. But, like, when there's something that's, like, still rustic and it's still in this, like, weird, ugly space, there is more to say about it, I feel. Because it's like, once you've gone so far into one thing, it's really difficult to kind of, like, take steps back. Whereas if you're in a space where the whole lighting can change, you can add something else. Maybe you don't wanna use clay anymore and you wanna put some, like, pieces of metal in there, who knows, which probably isn't the best idea, but, you know, there's so many options for you to be able to express the idea and what you're trying to push through in the piece. And so I think that being in a setting where you can do that is exciting. And it's just about like breathing through it, relaxing, and just thinking, like, okay, like I'm ready to hear the negative things about what I'm doing because that's how I'm going to grow.
Definitely. Yeah, and when you're learning a new skill, it's really important to not get discouraged when things get difficult. But I think if you are telling yourself that you're done learning, then maybe you're not as willing to accept the fact that inevitably you're gonna make a mistake, or you're gonna think of a way later that you could have done it differently in order to save time or whatever. So it's almost like you're unlocking checkpoints every time you make a piece, even if it's not the perfect thing. You don't plan to show it, or you don't plan to even share it with friends, but you're still getting experience points, and you're still like building a portfolio mentally,
Mhm.
or like a gallery of different techniques that you can use.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that's when you really do start to embrace who you are as a person. And as humans, we're imperfect, and that's okay. And we have to give ourselves grace. We have to give ourselves the leniency to be, to mess up, to scrape our knees a little and, get rough if we have to. There's so much pressure that we put on ourselves. And, we always want to be the top in our class or the best, uh, friend or this or that. And there's all these, expectations, again, going back to that we have on ourselves. And really it's limiting, and it's okay. Like I personally am more interested in somebody who's just like willing to just also accept when they did something wrong or call somebody out for it. There's this level of honesty that you have within yourself when you're willing to be transparent.
Yeah, and if you're a good friend, you'll let your friend know, like, hey, dude, when you drew the face, the nose was wrong, or like,
Mhm.
something could be tweaked. And if you're actually trying to improve your art process, it'll be beneficial to you. It wouldn't be like, oh my God, then he said this.
Yeah.
It's
I
so
can't believe
good.
he said it looked bad.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
but it's so important to take criticism and like appreciate it, and be grateful that even if you completely disagree with it, someone felt compelled. They're like, hey, I think this, and it's almost like suddenly there's a conversation that the art is provoking, and then the art takes on more than just a series of lines or whatever on paper. It becomes something more, and it's exciting. I really enjoy, even if it's something that I hate that the person's saying about my art. It's like, whatever, and then
Yeah,
maybe that's something I should hear, and maybe
exactly.
that's something I could learn from.
Yeah, because I think that everybody, for the most part, has good intentions. I mean, unless you're just like straight shitting on somebody and dunking on them. But really, for the most part, uh, if somebody comes at you with a criticism or a way to improve or just wanting to talk about your art, I always like to look at it as it's coming from a place of love and intention and like really a pure place. And I think that we don't always have to take every single advice that people give to us. We can always hear people out and give them a space to be honest and talk. But like the way we grow fully is by considering what other people have to say. Because sometimes when we're so zoomed in on what we're doing, we don't necessarily see what somebody else sees. And so I think that it depends obviously what you're trying to do, but if you are trying to convey this one certain type of message within your work, it's important to be able to also know what it's going to sound like when you're not there gauging the narrative of what the piece is supposed to be. And so if somebody else has a really, a different opinion or a thing that they're seeing, it's good to consider it. Even if you feel like, oh, well, that's not relevant, that's not what it's about, people are always going to have an opinion of what you do. You're an artist now, and I think that's where so much of that fear to fail comes from because you want people to like everything you do. But if somebody doesn't like what you do, it's okay. Like there's almost like a level of like projection when there is that like negative thing because you still did it. You still showed up and you created something out of love. And that is so much more substantial than just like wanting to control what everybody says about your work all the time.
Yeah, yeah, and if you're attached to the feedback you get, then maybe like, why are you making the art? You should reevaluate your intentions behind it. 'Cause it's like being at the public pool and being like, "Hey, everybody, look, I'm gonna do a big cannonball. Everybody," it's like, "Just look at me," and it's like, "Okay, dude, good job. You did a cannonball." Like, but I think that people will tell you if you do a spectacular cannonball because 'cause you're like,
Yeah.
I don't know, there's so many things we can do in life, and I don't think feedback is what you should build your intentions on
Mhm.
because people are so unpredictable. They're going through their own shit,
Yeah.
and it's so easy just to forget that someone has a whole different timeline, and we're just intersecting and having a conversation, but before and after we're in totally different places.
Mhm.
So it's always good to be, giving people forgiveness, like give them grace, like even if you're getting honked at in traffic and it's not your fault, like that person's going through something,
Yeah.
and getting out of the car or like yelling at them back is it's like you're just perpetuating the issue. But if you can just recognize, okay, maybe I did do something wrong and I'm sorry. Like it's like one time this guy cut me off like 3 times,
Oh,
and
man.
like I pulled up at the light after 10 minutes of him just cutting me off like really bad, like really dangerously. And I had my window down, I was looking at him, and then he unrolls his window all angry, and I was just like, "Hey, you almost cut me off like 3 times." And he's like, "Oh, what? Really?" And then
No way.
I was like, "Yeah, I mean it's cool. I just wanted to let you know." And he was just like, "Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, my bad." And
No.
and I just like nodded to him, and I was like, "It's cool, but just be careful."
Yeah.
And yeah, man.
I know. I feel like sometimes when we're so in the heat of our emotions, we like are blinded to just what the rational thing to do is. Like, I actually had a similar experience where I was at a festival and I was playing with like a laser pointer, and this guy was just like angry and he took like this like a water bottle and he just like threw it on the ground and he tried to walk away. And I, like, pointed at, like, him, and I pointed at which obviously isn't safe, but whatever. I pointed at him, and I pointed at the trash that he dropped, and then I pointed to the garbage, which was literally right next to him. And he looked at it, and he threw it away, and he came up to me, and he shook my hand. He was like, "Thank you, thank you. I'm sorry. I don't know why I did that." I was like, "It's okay. Like, like, I didn't even expect you to, like, throw away that piece of trash."
Yeah,
But,
and
like
it's almost like being seen changes the interpretation of what you're doing because you think
yeah.
it's like I'm invisible. I can just throw this and no one will know it was me who threw this
Yeah,
trash.
exactly.
But you're like, "Hey, shithead."
Yeah, don't litter.
It's always best to just try to diffuse situations, even if it's just with yourself. Like, don't get too worked up over anything. And like we talked about in our previous episode, just take strategic breaks.
Mhm.
Because if you're just like seeing all the negatives in a drawing, maybe you just need a little bit of space to reinterpret it
Yeah.
or to appreciate it more.
Yeah.
And maybe things that you think are failures actually look kind of cool when you step back a little bit or like look at it after 10 minutes.
Yeah, like, we all want to be incredible, but we are ready just for who we are. As if you're a genuine person, if you care, if you put love and time and compassion to what you do, like, you are just as deserving as somebody who already has that platform and is just doing the thing every day. Like, really, I think we can't stress enough how important it is to not do things for a financial and professional like that shouldn't be your number one motivation when it comes to creating. So I really feel that as artists, which can kind of curve this into another question that I think about, but how do we as artists, once we embrace failure, how do we also accept rejection? Because if we're constantly in a space where, yeah, maybe this didn't work out, or I'm going to embrace that I can't do this or that I don't want to do this. And then on top of that, like if you're going through like a difficult time within your art process, and you're also trying to be a professional on a professional level and you get rejected from different shows, from different people, maybe there was a grant that you wanted that you didn't get. How do you accept the rejection because as artists, that's going to happen.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, everybody takes criticism differently, but yeah, there's always room for growth. There's always, like I've been saying, like even if it's mean or with bad intentions, like maybe there's something in there you could learn from. Yeah, I guess just I don't know, asking yourself like, do you really care what this person thinks,
Mhm.
and maybe also, do you really care what you think about this person? Like, I think there's just layers to any situation that could be diffused if you just take an extra, don't act impulsively.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that's what it's always about as well, is just like not having all of your emotions tied into one thing. It's always looking at the things that you apply for as opportunities. And if that opportunity doesn't work out, don't like sit in a space of like lack of, like have an abundance mindset where you're like, okay, this didn't work out. Maybe they didn't want me, or I'm not, there yet. And, or maybe there's no actual reason as to why. Nobody has to give you an explanation. But at the end of the day, just because one thing doesn't work out doesn't mean that there isn't something better there for you. And I think that when we put ourselves in a mindset where we're constantly focusing on like, oh, I can't get into this community because they keep rejecting me, and like, I work really hard and I'm jaded, like these people don't care. It's like you're focusing so much, and this goes back to our like comparison episode if you guys wanted to check that out. It just goes back to this place where again you're looking at what's negative and what's not working for you, and you're wasting all of your time trying to figure out why people won't accept you, when really the most important thing as an artist is to accept yourself. Because if you can be in a place where you're happy with what you're doing, even if things don't always work out, you're embracing your failures, you're embracing when people don't reject you, you say, hey, maybe this is a missed opportunity, or maybe they missed out on me. Who cares? There's going to be so many more options. And as artists, we have to fail like thousands of times until like that one person an opportunity shows up. And then when you put yourself out there and you share what you do and it's genuine, people are going to see it. And then guess what? You get another opportunity and another opportunity. And it makes you feel comfortable, makes you feel happy that you can be in a space where you're focusing on the wins. The losses don't matter. No?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm excited. I'm putting together a body of work where I feel like I can do a solo show with it.
Mhm.
And actually, I could probably split it up into two, but I really I feel like I've painted hundreds of paintings and it just led into these 10 or like 20 that I think all fit together, and they really are some of my favorite paintings. And it's not that I don't care for those other 900, but I do feel as if it's it's not something that I'm worried about. I don't think that I'm worried about when it happens because I know that I'm just putting in my best work. I'm just showing up. I'm spending as much time per day as I can, working as hard as I possibly can, and I eat food, I take care of myself, I work out. But outside of that, there's no excuses. And I really think that as long as I'm working hard, it's like the little me inside me that wants to bitch and be like, "You're not doing enough." It can't really affect me if I don't give it the power that it needs to survive. I feel like it's just me versus me, and I surrender. I don't want to fight.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that's super exciting, and I have been watching you develop this work for a really long time, and I think when you put so much time and intentions and you've gone through the failures, you've embraced that some things work, some things don't work, and you're at this point now where you're ready to share what you do. And I kind of went through this recently when I had my solo show before we left for California when we were in Miami. And I was also at that same place where I had all these pieces finished and I felt really happy and proud of the work that I was doing. But yeah, I did get rejected by a couple of galleries, and it was difficult just to get somebody to pay attention to you because so much of the art world has this kind of like elitism within it where it's like if you aren't already big, then or you aren't selling to a certain extent or you don't have enough followers on Instagram, it's really difficult to gauge um a level of relationship on a professional level for the gallery to be like, okay, well, I trust you to sell work for me, which is difficult. And I think at first you kind of have to take a chance on that artist. But I do genuinely believe that if the art is good and somebody sees it, they will trust that and they will be so happy to have you. And it won't be this relationship where you're like forcing this one gallery, oh, I want to get into the MoMA or like I've been wanting to get into like, Perez or whatever, it's like no, like you have to gauge your expectations and not have to force people to want you there because you always bring something genuine to the table regardless if people see it or not, and it's all about making those right connections, being friendly, being kind, showing up to the right events, being a part of a community. And when you get noticed, that person will see you. You don't ever need to chase opportunities. You can try to make people see and notice you, but if they don't want that, then don't force it, And I think like after I was rejected by a couple places, there was finally one gallery that I didn't even really have to try so hard, and he loved the work that I did, and I was able to be a part of Moksha, and it was great, and it was such a beautiful show, and I was able to have a space where, like, the work was also respected, and I think that we deserve all artists deserves a level of respect regardless of what you do because you're putting time and effort and energy into something you love and you're sharing with the world. Like that is such a pure energy that we don't always get from, your basic contemporary slash modern whatever just because they already selling a bunch of work. Like, it's so much more genuine when it's like a local artist who this is like what they do and they're working other jobs just to fulfill this need. Regardless of what rejections come along, like you're definitely going to have a huge opportunity. So,
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
wishing you
I'm
best luck.
feeling really good about it.
Yeah, I do too.
I'm feeling much more confident being out here. When we went to Hashimoto,
Mhm.
Corey Hilford, Richard Heller, like it feels so real, like being here
Yeah.
close to LA. It feels very doable and I'm so excited. It feels very, very nice.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that I guess that leads into like why do you create?
Mhm.
Like what would you say is your motivation to make paintings or drawings?
That's a good question. I would definitely say creating is like what helps me feel alive. Cause I think that there's a lot of there's a lot of like stress in the world, but I don't use it as a way to escape. I use it as a way to kind of re-spark joy in a way and like bring in some light and happiness because it just makes me happy and I feel like I can't picture my life without it, and everybody has their own thing that they like to do, but I also so enjoy being able to create something and like watching people smile or question or ask or like even get angry. Like sometimes people get angry at some of the stuff I do. And like I like that. Like I want to for people to feel inspired in different ways. And I think that yeah, that I'm committed to that. And like our commitment it's more important than our need for acceptance, and so for me it's a personal journey but it's also a way for me to share love. That's it. What about you?
Don't ask me that right now. So do you feel like your art relies on a community? You said you like to make art and it sparks joy. You're trying to share joy.
I definitely feel that it's a part of it. If I did not share my art and like I don't know, I did something else for a living and I would just paint every day, then I would be like happy doing that. But I also feel like there's this level of connection that is made when other people see the work. And I used to think about the question like, do you make art for the audience, or does the audience matter, right?
Right.
And it's really interesting to think about as an artist because we're always wanting to create work to also impress other people. But I don't think that for me it starts with trying to impress people. I just want to make connections and I want for people to connect. But again, I don't start from a place where I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this so other people like it. Like, no, like this is what I'm going to do because that's what feels right. And it's a personal experience. And then from that introspection leads to that like extra outer experience. And then when people see the work and they start thinking about things that they haven't thought about in a while, that's like really exciting for me because being able to inspire, but also, provide a sense of joy in somebody's life. We're dealing with a lot of stress and always seeing different news and like negativity like all the time. It's nice to just kind of be able to step away from that, question things.
Totally. All right, now you can ask me. How about me?
Okay. How about you?
I think I'm very selfish. I make art for myself,
Mhm.
but I also really love talking to people about what they see, and it's almost like looking at a cloud together. It's like, what are you experiencing when you look at that? It's really fun for me.
Yeah.
I love talking to people. I describe myself as a social introvert. I really love time alone, but I also love talking to people. I feel like I transition between a house cat and a golden retriever. When I'm around people, I love talking to them, but when I'm alone, I'm like, get out of my
Yep.
room, like
Stop talking to me.
trying to play Minecraft.
Yeah. There was awesome, guys. Well, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to us. We are Art Portals Podcast and embrace your failures. Be a little fuck up, be a little delinquent. It's okay. We want to see you mess up a little. That's how beautiful and unique art is made. So
Mm-hmm.
get out there.
Bye.